Hi, I'm Randy Elstrott. Did you know that the human race has a skeleton in its closet? Yes, and the name of that skeleton is slavery. Of course, in modern times, there isn't a country on earth in which slavery is legal, but it has not always been this way. Throughout history, a major percentage of any population was its slaves, and slavery had become so widespread that human rights historian David P. Forsyth estimated that at the beginning of the 19th century, 3/4 of the world's population was trapped in some form of slavery. 3/4! At that rate, it would be difficult to find a living human being who does not have slavery in his ancestry or slave blood in his veins. Now, the oldest records in our possession show that slavery was alive and well at the dawn of human civilization. Every race, every creed, and every culture of human history has been both the victim to and the perpetrator of slavery, and Christianity is no exception. Some would argue that for nearly 2 millennia, the church protected and participated in the institution of slavery. Thousands of sermons were preached and books written by leaders of the church to protect and defend slavery. Jacob K. Olupona of Harvard Divinity School said, Christianity was deeply culpable in the slave trade inasmuch as it consistently provided a moral cloak for the buying and selling of human beings. That's an interesting term he used, a moral cloak. You see, a cloak is a garment used to hide or cover oneself, like a veil. Olupona seems to be telling us that through much of church history, the minds of its leaders have been dulled by the presence of a veil. Well, we learned in the previous video that such a veil does exist. It exists within the scriptures. So where in the scriptures did the church leaders encounter the veil concerning slavery? They encountered the veil in 2 passages written by Moses. They are Exodus 21:20 and Leviticus 25:44. Together, these passages make 4 bold statements concerning slavery. They are, number 1, a human being can be bought and sold. Number 2, a human being can be the property of another human being. Number 3, the owner of a human being can freely beat that human being within inches of death, and even if the slave does die, there is no penalty as long as the owner's intention in the beating was not to kill him. And number 4, upon the death of his owner, the human being becomes the property of the owner's heirs. Now, I think it's safe to say we've encountered the veil. I don't know that anyone believes those 4 statements represent morally acceptable behavior in the sight of God. Yet they are right there in the Bible. These are the passages that provided the veil that dulled the minds of church leaders, even while a major percentage of the church was bound in slavery. Do you remember how we defined the veil? We said the veil is any word or thought or line of thinking that we encounter in the Bible that gives the reader the impression that the Father is different than the Son. Can you picture Jesus condoning those 4 statements about slavery? That's really hard to imagine. But here's the question. How did humanity go from adhering fully to those 4 statements to the world we have today, free from institutionalized slavery? The answer is the Litmus Test. You see, over the course of a few centuries, a handful of very persuasive individuals started applying the Litmus Test to those 2 Old Testament passages. We will call this group the abolitionists. They discovered some powerful biblical truths. Here's the logic behind the most persuasive of these truths. Number 1, since Jesus summarized the entire law in Matthew 7:12 as do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and since Jesus is the image of the invisible God, that's Colossians 1:15, then clearly God also would summarize the law this way. Number 2, since God would have us treat others the way we wish to be treated, then enslaving another against his will and treating him harshly is contrary to the overall summary of God's law. Number 3, with this in mind, it becomes clear that a face value understanding of those 2 Old Testament passages contradicts the overall summary of God's law. Therefore, it must be incorrect. To correctly understand these passages, we must understand them through the person and character of Jesus. This new understanding of God's thoughts towards slavery caught on. You might say it went viral, and in a few hundred years, the blight that had stained human existence since the dawn of history disappeared, and slavery was rendered illegal everywhere on planet Earth. So why does a face value understanding of a Bible passage seem to communicate the opposite of what God is truly saying? Well, the short answer is because there's a veil in place. But for a more detailed answer, look for my upcoming series of audio blogs called Muddy Waters. You don't want to miss this.
What if the evolution process generated a living being in the world of dark matter? What if such a being has the ability to perceive and influence our world? Now we have a legitimate and completely naturalistic explanation for the undeniable designs of life, and we have not invoked a God or a creator.